Welcome back to Restless. My name is Father Joseph. I lift my mug and they start laughing.
I love it.
Well, generally, I generally laugh at your intros, but we have realized that the mugs can actually contain liquid.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
so we have
actually
been
props.
using them.
Yeah,
They
which is
are
like really exciting.
non-alcoholic water.
It is water. It's dihydrogen monoxide.
It
Right.
is. It's Norwalk's finest, right out of the sewer. I mean, sewer, no, not the sewer.
Well, at one point it was. Yep.
This is on
delicious.
video.
It's
Okay.
delicious. Yeah,
Yep.
video and audio. So
Yep.
anyway, welcome to Restless. My name is Father Joseph Gill. If you haven't gotten that by the earlier 200 episodes that we've recorded,
I know.
and
Hey, maybe this is the first one. Welcome.
if
Yes.
so,
welcome, new listener,
Yes.
viewer.
Glad
Thank
to have you. Now
Yes.
download the other 199.
Here we talk about the truth
Yes.
Yes.
this
and
is
the
very-
Bible.
And yes, and Veritas.
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 Yeah, that's right.
Veritas is Latin
Right.
for peanut butter.
Truth.
Truth.
Oh,
Yes.
peanut butter.
Okay.
They had peanut butter in the ancient times.
They did not. I believe peanuts came from Georgia.
I don't think that's true.
Anyway,
Actually, peanuts I think were created.
speaking of, were they?
I think so. Yeah, I think peanuts are like a man-made thing.
No way.
No,
Pretty sure.
that is.
That would
no.
explain all the allergies.
I'm actually
no.
sure, but now I have to look it up. Okay, you guys talk. I'm gonna look this up.
Go look
I
look
might
it
have
up on
completely
the,
made that
the
up.
Siri, the YouTube, the Google.
I'm gonna use
I don't know,
Siri.
but-
That would be annoying.
But this is actually a good segue because we're talking about food. And we're talking about food today on our topic. We're not talking about like lasagna. We're talking about a more
Could we though?
a better food than lasagna.
Yeah.
Tacos. But better than tacos.
Right.
We're talking about the Eucharist because we're in the midst of this national Eucharistic revival. And what a revival it's been. So we had the very great privilege in our diocese here in Bridgeport to have one of the 4 processions coming to the Eucharist, coming to us. So if you don't know about this, there's been 4 Eucharistic processions nationwide, one from California, one from Texas, one from the north,
St. Paul, Minnesota, I
St.
think.
Paul, Minnesota, and one that started in New Haven, Connecticut. That's going to go down through D.C. and all the way. They're
Wait, it
going
didn't start in Boston.
No, it started in
No,
New
it
Haven.
started in-
of
Oh,
all
really?
places.
Started
It
in
started at the grave, right? At the grave
wow.
of Blessed
Michael-
Michael McGivney.
Michael McGivney, yeah.
I'm related to Michael McGivney.
Are you
Are you really?
I am.
I can kind of see that in your face.
Whoa.
actually.
Really?
Is he your great
I do too.
No.
Like,
that is-
look at the
that
camera,
can't-
Paul.
That can't be possible. He was my grandfather's paternal grandmother's cousin, who was Catherine McGivney.
I have to draw that chart,
yeah,
but
so
okay.
Catherine McGivney was my grandfather's grandmother.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
really cool, though. I'm just have a
Yeah.
somewhere
Well,
in-
so
somewhere in
here's
the
the dirty
lineage,
little
yeah.
secret. If you're Irish, and you came and you were living in New Haven in the late 1800s,
You're probably
the
related.
chances you were related to the McGivney family generally were very high because they were a massive, massive Catholic family.
10 kids, 11 kids.
Well, yeah, but then there was other McGivneys.
Oh, other than McGivneys,
right? They
that's
the
true,
cousins.
yeah.
So like Michael McGivney, I think had many siblings, probably 8. There was a bunch that died too because it was like the 1800s.
Yeah.
And then there was cousins. So there's a lot. So Catherine. So he had a sister, Catherine McGivney, who died. But he also had a cousin, Catherine McGivney, who's my grandfather's grandmother.
Wild. Okay.
Okay.
Well, he's probably praying for you.
I hope so.
Hope you
I
too.
need it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a knight though. Isn't that a shame?
What? You're not a knight of Columbus?
No.
What?
I was a Columbian squire
Oh, were you really? They had squires back then. Wow.
back then.
What is that? What is
Columbian squires is like the junior knights.
They don't have it anymore.
Oh, really?
No. It's
What is
shut
it now?
down. They
There's
they
nothing?
don't have
Nada?
anything. They eliminated it.
That's sad.
Nihilo?
It was too bad.
Nothing.
Yeah, thanks.
But
The biggest thing we
We've been
did was
talking
the
about
Krispy
Latin,
Kreme fundraiser where you buy at $3 a dozen and you sell at $6 a dozen. And we made
Nice.
so much money.
Oh,
Let
I
me tell you
bet.
something.
Krispy Kreme's pretty good.
I love it.
Not gonna lie.
I love that business model.
Buy low, sell high. It tends to work. Let's
Kinda
talk
how all
about
businesses
the
work.
The
Eucharist.
So anyway,
Eucharist.
so the Eucharist, it started in New Haven, Connecticut, where Blessed Michael McGivney
Yep.
is currently buried. And all of them are going to meet in Indianapolis for a Eucharistic Congress.
Yeah.
So this Eucharistic procession that started in New Haven, it came through our diocese. And did you guys attend any part of that?
Yes.
Yes.
So tell us about your experience. What did you attend? What did you see?
I attended one thing.
Okay.
Where?
It was.
It was at St. Cecilia's Church.
Me too.
Were you
That was
there?
the one thing I attended.
Did you go?
I was
we
at
must
St.
have-
Cecilia's.
We must have been there
I'm not
together.
lying.
Did
No,
you
but it was-
did you do the procession from St. Gabriel's
No.
too? Neither did I. Look at that. Wow.
But St. Cecilia's had adoration all night long, so you probably weren't.
Well,
there
I
at the
was
same
there
time.
for the bishop's holy hour with vespers and
Well-
homily.
Me too. But were
Yeah.
you there for the holy hour afterwards?
I stayed for a bit, but I had to, of course, fly out the
Did
next
you
morning.
hear the person speak afterwards?
I did not.
Me neither.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go.
What?
Amazing how we didn't run into each other at all.
Well, there
I
was
think
a lot of people there. So.
Yeah, there was probably about 1,000, I would say.
Yeah.
The St. Cecilia's was filled.
Wow, that's really
only
good.
Yeah.
we were a little late. We were a little late because my 1-year-old son
Is
only
one.
kind of wanted to go.
Yeah.
And we almost didn't even have standing room.
Wow.
That's how many people were there.
Oh my gosh,
So-
that's great to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's
But
great.
when you walk in with a baby, people tend to make room for you. So
Oh,
it
that's
was-
good.
Yeah, it was
That's
good.
good. I think he was crying because of excitement.
Yeah, he was,
that was his-
he was crying for
that
some
was the
reason.
reason.
Yeah.
So I was at St. Cecilia's with the morning mass with the bishop, and then we walked down. So it went through probably I think it was 19 parishes it went through, but I was the one that was blessed to hold the Eucharist as we walked
Oh,
down
really?
from
No
St.
way.
Oh,
Cecilia's
excellent.
to St. Gabriel's, which was beautiful. It's about a mile walk.
Right.
There was a couple things that really struck me. First of all, when we came out of the church, the kids from Catholic Academy of Stanford were all waving handkerchiefs
yeah.
and cheering, and I was very moved by that. That was very beautiful. I was very struck by the fact that by the people that drove on the opposite side of the road from us. We had one lane on this 2-lane road, and I thought it was such a great witness. There was no hostility, even though there was quite a bit of traffic because of it. But people were just kind of respectfully sitting in their cars, some looking, some kind of curious as to what was going on over there. And then when we got down there was kids from Mater Salvatoris school who had strewn rose petals all on the ground as
awesome.
I was walking with the Eucharist, and it was really a humbling experience. It was one of the most grueling physically experiences, holding the Eucharist, trying to hold it above
Yeah,
my
how
head.
heavy
Was
is
it
the
a heavy
monstrance?
monstrance?
It wasn't a heavy monstrance, but I mean,
Well, over time, though.
it's
Yeah.
a mile.
I mean, you're walking a mile holding something directly in front
and
of
you're
you.
walking very slowly. So when we're talking, it was a good 45 minutes of holding that
Oh, wow.
monstrance
Yeah.
up in the air.
Wow.
But the crowd was huge. It was tremendous. It was a
Kind of
couple
cool
hundred
to get
people.
to offer something up like that to the Lord directly in front of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
It really was. I mean, it was my private holy hour. Jesus
Oh,
was
wow.
one
Really
foot in
cool.
front of my face
Really cool.
for an almost entire hour.
Was the bishop with you at that point?
Not at that point.
Not
No,
at that
he,
point, okay.
he drove home and then met us down there.
Yeah.
But
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah,
So,
it was
so
really
that
cool.
was your. So you con-celebrated mass or celebrated mass and then processed down to St. Gabriel's.
Yep.
Is that how it worked? Okay.
yeah, we had a holy hour down there,
Yeah.
which was very nice.
Did your parish have any of the events?
We were too far off the beaten path.
Right, because I know it spent a hot second in Ridgefield.
It did.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
did. Our bishop is thinking about perhaps doing one for the northern parishes in the diocese as well,
Yeah.
doing a Danbury one.
He announced that on Let Me Be Frank this week. So
Oh, good. So I'm not telling tales out of
it's-
school.
Yeah. Well, but the point is that that plan is even more concrete than a hypothetical.
Good.
Like he basically said he's working on it.
Good. I'm hoping
It's
we
going to
can
be
do
announced
something.
in September.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. I hope we can do something here at my parish in Monroe, Connecticut.
Yeah.
Monroe.
Maybe. Monroe, yeah.
Monroe.
We're about 3 miles from St. Stephen's in Trumbull, and that could be a really cool.
3 miles.
Yeah. It's a bit long. I mean, we may have to
More than one priest will have
more
to
than one
hold.
priest. Definitely,
Yeah.
we may have to book it. Maybe go a little faster than we were going the first
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
Right.
but
right.
it's really cool. So, do you think that that this is going to lead to a lasting Eucharistic revival in the church? This big push
In this
has been-
diocese?
Well, this is the end of the national one up at this Indianapolis convention, but our diocese is kind of taking that and going to do the next 3 years. So, do you think it's going to
Right.
renovate faith in the real presence?
I don't know how many. I mean, so let's just before we go anywhere, we'll say like the Lord can use anything, and it is incredibly fitting that He would use Himself in a sense, you know what I mean, to bring people to Himself. And
Sure.
so if this led to unbelievable conversion, I wouldn't be surprised at all. If the Eucharist really is, and it is, right, the source and summit of our faith. Of course, something like a 3-year emphasis on the Eucharist is going to pay dividends.
Yeah.
You're going to see good fruit from it. So that said, right, do I think that it's going to just lead to like a bucket load of conversions? I don't know, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I've heard this in a couple different places, and I do agree. So I think doing these events in and of themselves it's worth it to do it, even
Yeah.
if it's just the faithful, right?
Sure.
The devout Catholics who are showing up on a Tuesday night to go
Right.
walk a mile, right? Which actually doesn't seem that particularly grueling, but regardless, other than holding the monstrance, fine. But I think that So in and of themselves, they're attractive, and in and of themselves, it's worth doing. I don't. So and I'm glad that this whole procession is happening, because my issue, it's not a bad thing, but my hypothesis is that just creating, a night here or there, which is like, oh, great. It's like a holy hour with a talk about the importance of the Eucharist throughout the United States. That's a good thing. But in and of itself, that's not like
lasting change.
It's not lasting change, because it's like, well, yeah, I mean, we should be having holy hours on a regular basis anyway, I think, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. Like, it should be available. So maybe it creates that opportunity, and maybe there's a lot of fruit from that.
Right.
I do think, however, the display of, I think the bishop said it best in his podcast. He says it reminded him of his childhood, and he lived in like Catholic Brooklyn, where processions, especially the big saint processions, like big feast days, was just a normal part of society.
Yeah.
And so seeing that become part of our kind of language of culture in Catholic areas, or in big Catholic areas like the Northeast and certain parts of the Midwest and so on, like, that's a good thing. That's a very good thing, and that people are comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
Because I bet if you were to rewind 20 years, you wouldn't have had the turnout in the processions. People would be like, I don't want to look weird.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of
possibility,
strange.
yeah.
It's strange.
I also-
But it is kind of strange. It's weird, and it's a good thing,
Yeah.
right? Anyway.
I also think that it's just this amazing antidote to the raging sterile secularism of our time.
No,
You know,
for sure.
Like, to the non-believer, it looks like we are following behind a piece of bread in a gigantic golden monstrance. And the fact that we, in the collective, right, if indeed the 1,000 people who showed up at St. Cecilia's did that, maybe it I was gonna say it puts a seed of doubt in the mind, but it's not that. It puts a seed of faith in the mind.
Right. Right.
And so it's just this unbelievable witness. And also because it's not just about witnessing to the people who see it, right? And I'm actually stealing this from Monsignor Royal, who is at a very minimum a friend of the network, right? The fact that it's like we are quote unquote parading, we are bringing the God of the universe into the streets. Like, that's what's happening, and he will sanctify the towns where it happens.
Right.
Because he's faithful. It's like, in a previous episode, I had mentioned how there's an interaction with grace that is a piece of God working in history. Well, this is an interaction with grace. I can't see how it couldn't be an interaction with grace. It's a Eucharistic procession.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
Right.
like if you're a betting man. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah.
probably interacting with grace.
Anytime grace breaks into human history or human nature, I mean, we experience a positive change for the positive.
Right.
Yeah. I think that point you made about radical secularism, or what do you, sterile secular. I think that's big. So I was struck by something. So I recently interviewed a guy for a position at my company, and he had mentioned in passing, I forget why it came up, but I was interviewing him. We were just talking about like interests or whatever, kind of outside of work, and he had said that, well, my wife and I are involved with this church. But we don't go that often. We're not that involved, but we are somewhat involved, and like for music or something. And I was like, wow, he doesn't even feel comfortable saying that he goes to church sometimes. He has to qualify it,
Right.
And I'm like, wow, that's
interesting. Yeah.
that's thought about sterile secularism.
Yeah.
And like, if I were to, I don't really care. As you know, I'm unabashedly myself after 4 years of this, but like, I have no issue saying it. But if somebody says like, oh, I'm going to church tonight, it's the Feast of the Assumption or whatever, and I'm going to Mass tonight, people are like, whoa,
Right.
what is that? Like, why? It's not Sunday, and like, you go to church,
Right.
But those are the things. But if you see like thousands of people marching in the street, it's like peace. It's not even like peacefully or radically. It's just
you're just doing
reverently,
it. Right.
reverently. Well, that's a different ballgame.
And I think that it's an embodiment, right? Like the pilgrimages themselves, the processions themselves. I almost just knocked over my water. Are an embodiment of ultimately the Christian life's call to heroic virtue. Right, so you are called to actually do things. Like, you're called to follow the commandments and live the Beatitudes, and that plays a role in your salvation. And this is, I think It's analogously. I'm not saying if you don't go on Eucharistic processions, you're going to hell. That's not what I'm saying. Right, but analogously, like you are living, like to say, well, I'm going to church on a Tuesday, is an example of living the life, doing it, and processing is an example of living the life, doing it, and I think that's the sterility that we're talking about, which is that, like
merely intellectual.
Yeah, I mean, it's
experiential.
Yeah, people aren't doing it. Well,
I love how Catholicism inscribes it into our very bodies. The action of pilgrimaging or the action of processing is a very tangible. It's a tangible way to worship, because I think at some point we run out of words, and that's I've only been to a couple Protestant services in my life, but it's so word heavy and so lacking in symbolism and in the richness of the full body experience of Christ, and that's what I love about a procession.
Right.
Yeah. So I do think that the idea. So maybe just to conclude this point, I think the idea that we can have processions like widespread throughout the country, and it's not just like this little neighborhood in the middle of some city that no one goes to. The fact that it's like widespread and it's getting good attendance and media attention is a very good thing.
Yeah.
And in and of itself, that's good. It doesn't necessarily need to. Like, we don't need to be too concerned. I think maybe the final point is, like, we don't need to be too concerned about what the precise fruit. It's like a very scientific way of looking at, like, what's the precise fruit of this Eucharistic procession? Right. No, just doing it in and of itself is good.
Yeah, we've given worship to God. I mean, worship to God itself is, we don't do it for a further end.
Right,
it's an end in itself.
It is the ultimate
worship
end.
God.
Yeah,
right. It's the whole reason we live life is to worship Him.
Right.
But you make an interesting point, which I struggle with in ministry too, is that, event-based ministry versus kind of something ongoing. I'm very big into this Catholic summer camp, Camp Veritas. No relation to Veritas Network, but it should be.
Except for a love of the truth.
I wish we could partner. Maybe we'll do an episode from Camp Veritas this year.
Yeah. Cheers. Apparently we're cheersing today. Cheers.
Cheers. But in Camp Veritas, these teens go and they have this powerful experience because they have a similar Eucharistic procession in that the Eucharist comes to each individual kid, and they get a chance to hold the cope and the humeral veil the priest is holding it. So it's kind of like touching the garment of Jesus, and they get a good 5 to 10 seconds face to face with Jesus, like I had, for an hour,
right
there, where you're just right there, and it's Him loving you, and not no one else in the room. He's loving everyone, but but you get that intense time. And so a lot of the kids have a lot of teary experiences, really a lot of barriers broken down. But the challenge is, what do you do ongoing? When they come home, that's 1 week out of the year. So what's the other 51 weeks look like? And that's the challenge: is how do you keep the faith strong, going? And hopefully there's things like youth group, and there's things like just a vibrant parish experience where you'll encounter Christ during the Mass. And I think that is an important next step we have to look at is, all right, so if we're doing Eucharistic revival and people are then going to go back to their parishes, what is going to continue nourishing that Eucharistic faith? I'm really pushing hard this year, and it's been a struggle at my parish, and I love my parish very much, but they're not particularly into like some of the older traditions of our faith.
Could you give a couple examples?
Well, the biggest example is I'm really pushing kneeling for Holy Communion and receiving on the tongue. And we have kneelers out there. And I've preached on it, and I'm putting another bulletin article in about it, and I talk about it for Mass. And I still get kind of, for me, a little bit disappointing. It's probably around 20% or less that kneel.
Right.
And probably even less than that receive on the tongue. And it's, I don't know, it's kind of a cultural thing, I guess. But I think that's an important piece of this Eucharistic revival, that if we really believe He's the God of the universe, how is that going to change how we worship on Sunday?
Right.
How is it going to change how a priest celebrates Mass with greater reverence, dignity? How are we going to receive Him? How are we going to dress? I'm really pushing that too with my parish, is like, let's stop wearing the ripped jeans to Mass.
Right.
Because we recognize who it is.
Yeah. I mean,
approaching.
like they say, right? It's the wedding feast of the Lamb. We just show up to a wedding, in ripped jeans.
Right.
So.
Right.
Although, admittedly, I have been to a wedding in Arkansas, and there were people at the wedding in jeans. So maybe it's a cultural thing.
Sounds like a stereotype, but all right.
No, I mean, it happened. It happened. Yeah. I was as surprised as you. To the kneeling and receiving on the tongue, I think it is a popular Orthodox opinion, like an Orthodox Christian, Orthodox meaning as an
Small
adjective,
O.
not in the East. Although maybe them too. But
no, they don't kneel at all. Actually, they stand to receive.
No way.
Well, they do like the back
because they tilt back. And they
really
have a golden
with the
spoon. So the sacred host is soaked in the precious blood.
Right.
Intinction.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
And it's not leavened, right? It's unleavened.
No, it
Or
is.
it is leavened. It's leavened,
That's what
yeah.
I meant to say.
It's puffy, yeah.
Yeah.
It's puffy.
Okay.
I don't know. How else do you describe it? It's puffy bread. Like,
yeah.
Next time I make bread, I'm gonna say I'm making it puffy and then let it rise.
Thank you. Yes, you should.
Anyway,
you should.
go on.
Puffier the better.
Train of thought. Come back around.
Kneeling. and
Kneeling.
receiving
Kneeling.
and
Oh,
receiving.
so I think that there's a danger in. I think that we just need to make sure that that doesn't become a pharisaical approach, which is that people are kneeling just because they're told to. Now, I happen to agree with you that it is more reverent, and when I receive kneeling and on the tongue, but I think it's good that you're preaching it. And knowing you, I know you're preaching it well, and it's important that people don't just do that. And so, in terms of increasing Eucharistic reverence and adoration, really, right? I think it's important that there is an increased catechesis of what the Eucharist actually is.
I think the two are necessarily have to go in tandem because to preach about the Eucharist and then to receive it on the hand, to me, sounds like
Right.
I've just undone everything.
Did
I've
you
taught.
hear what I just
This
said?
is the God of the universe. Oh, by the way, receive him like you're getting a potato chip.
Right.
Like, no, that's like, because it's the God of the universe, it has to be something special, bowing to our knees. And because, again,
Yeah, certainly that.
I think our faith has to be inscribed in our flesh. It's not a notional belief in the real presence as if it's just a mental exercise. Okay, that's him. It's lived out.
Yeah. I do think, I do agree that obviously catechesis is important, and I want to downplay that. But I do think, we mentioned already in this talk about how there's a very corporal reality of us as humans and our corporal reality of our faith, and that we have the Eucharist as this physical manifestation of the creator of the universe that we are able to interact with, let's say. And so too do we have, like, when we say, like, well, if more people were to just kneel and they're just doing it, well, maybe there's something that's being reinforced there that is a working.
Right. Fair enough.
They're not even. It does take more effort. And
Right.
so there's something there. I think
Right.
like at St. Pius and Diocese of Bridgeport, they require everyone to come up to the rail. You can receive on the hand standing if you want to, but it's awfully awkward.
Yeah, but the peer pressure is such.
Yeah, but most people kneel and receive on the tongue, mostly because it's just like.
That's how
It
they
just
do it.
makes more sense because
Right.
there's a padded thing there that you could kneel at.
And we have kneelers too at my church.
Yeah.
Kneelers that I stand behind the kneeler and people
Right.
stretch their hands over it. And
Yeah.
Do you use a paten?
we do use a paten.
And that's new since, recently, right? Relatively?
Yeah,
It's been a year or
since
so,
I got there, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But what else would you recommend on a parish level to continue the Eucharistic revival that you've seen?
I think having the weekly adoration with confession is just great.
I would throw some praise and worship in there.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean,
In as separate or in
You
a
can
different-
hire Matt and his wife.
that's
by
true.
the way.
Yeah.
That wasn't a plug, but
Yeah.
no, I'm during adoration, and to be clear, I don't mean 60 minutes of music, 60 minutes of adoration. You know what I mean? Like, you need, like, people know how to do it.
Yeah.
And so
Silence,
there's
interspersed,
right, and so you end up playing. We end up playing 3 or 4 songs. I guess this is a plug. It's 3 or 4 songs, and usually we're trying to listen if the Lord's calling anything in particular out from us,
Yeah, sure.
And so it ends up being hopefully kind of tailored as well, And then there's some silence, and so you've just heard this song, and now you get to sit in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, because I think that's one of the reasons that I'm not saying adoration is ineffective for some people. That's not really what I mean. But I do think that people struggle to pray in silence in front of the Blessed Sacrament.
60 minutes is hard. It's long. If you're new at this.
I wasn't even talking 60 minutes. I mean, I think that
Any amount of time, yeah.
right. Yeah, it's hard for someone to do 5 minutes in prayer if they haven't been praying very often.
Yeah.
And so.
So I guess maybe just to complete that point, I think it's I think those types of things. I think that on a very tangible level, just kind of on a practical level, I think those things can be great, kind of on a semi-regular basis. But I think just for a parish that just doesn't have the means or the capability of having like praise and worship music, that's not like just having the Holy Hour is at least something,
Yes.
And it might be for 3 people, but guess what? then you have 3 people.
Again, it's the worship
Right.
of the Lord. You know,
Yeah.
it's not about
Right.
numbers.
It's
or
not about numbers,
fruits.
and then hopefully, I mean, we've seen it in Stamford. We have 2 parishes that do it. Actually, 3 that have adoration on one random night during the week. Well, it's not random.
St. Cecilia's, Holy Spirit, and
Holy Name on
Holy Name.
Fridays. Yeah,
Okay.
maybe just first Friday. I
the
think
Polish parish. Yeah.
Polish parish. Yeah, and
I
so
didn't
they-
know it was only those 2, if I'm honest with you.
You think there's more?
Yeah, I thought there was more.
St. Mary's used to have it on Sunday afternoons.
They might still. I'm not
They,
sure.
I think they might still do it. But
Any case, it's something like that.
yeah, beautiful.
But
beautiful.
there's been a lot of fruit that's come of that.
Yeah.
You know, like it was funny. I was in confession with one of the priests, and I said, and it was like 30 minutes left in the 2-hour block, and he says, "How many people are in line for confession?" And I go, "A lot." And he goes, "Oh, you know, it's because there's actually that many people that are going. You know,
Good.
at least for confession,
Good.
and it's like,
Which
well,
I-
it's tiring.
Which I think
understand,
is
but
an important connection to the Eucharist.
Right.
In that one must prepare one's soul, be in the state of grace in order to receive it fruitfully.
that's right.
And that's something I continue to preach to at my parishes.
Yeah, that's
The necessity of frequent confession.
I remember when my wife entered into full communion with the church, the piece of advice that the pastor of St. Joseph's in New York City, it's down by NYU, it's a Dominican parish, Father Boniface. Shout out to Father Boniface for bringing my wife into the church.
Awesome. There you go.
Yeah. But he said if you're looking for a good parish, basically, he said look at their bulletin and see how often they have adoration and see how often they have confession.
Oh, it's so
and
true.
that is all you need to know.
That's very true.
You know,
Yeah.
that's the reflection. That's the point.
Yeah. My friends moved up to Massachusetts. That's exactly what they did. There's like a parish up there that's like one of the Stamford parishes. They have confession every day and
Right.
multiple daily masses and all the things, you know, praise and worship music
That'll tell
once a
ya.
month and
Right.
adoration here and, you know, all the things.
Right.
Very vibrant parish.
Right.
Yeah.
So to some extent but that requires a lot of, you know, clerical support.
It does.
And I
It
know we
does,
don't
but-
have all of, like everywhere doesn't have that. But I think there's a lot of fruit that can come with it for those that have the means. to
There
do
is
it.
a lot of fruit.
But is it fair to say we're talking potentially once a week, doubled up, meaning like you have adoration for the one night during the week, and whoever is the pastor, you know, or the parochial vicar, I guess, right, just hears confession during that 1 hour. You know, I mean, as the lay person in the room, along with Paul, I would be like, come on, you know, like you telling me you can't give me an hour?
Yeah.
Like that's if any priest came to me and was like, I don't have the time.
Yes.
I'd be like, come on. Like, and,
So-
and maybe I would actually hear them out more, but I
I-
would probably lead with come on.
I haven't done much, but if any of the priests in the Diocese of Bridgeport listening that are down here, we need something on Thursday nights by Stamford. Just saying,
Right.
we need adoration.
Just
and
throwing it
confession
out
on
That's
there.
right.
Thursday
You've got,
nights.
you've got Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
admittedly,
huge.
we have.
That's huge.
We do have some not perpetual, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
nearly.
I say you got almost perpetual.
Pretty dang close.
yeah, 7 to 9 or something.
Yeah.
10.
7 to 10. Yeah, every day,
Yeah.
which is that's awesome. So
Yeah.
It's great. That's an adoration chapel. We didn't actually say what it was. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Assumed
So-
you would guess.
yeah.
Context clues.
Exactly. There's actually 5 perpetual adoration or quasi-perpetual adoration chapels in our diocese, which is
Right.
awesome.
Right.
Yeah. Is
And
that
that's-
something you're trying to consider implementing, or?
No, because the parish next door has it.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's no
Yeah,
way.
fair enough.
There's no way to get.
Oh,
we
St.
do,
Teresa's.
We do 12 hours a week though, every Monday.
Really?
Oh wow.
Yeah,
That's
from
great.
Wow.
9 a.m. to 9 p.m.
See,
which
there you
is-
go. I mean, it's.
And that's your time.
That's our time. Yeah, it's been really good. We have. I mean, I would say there are times. I mean, we always have 2 adorers, but there are times we have 5 or 6.
Right.
That's great.
Which is nice. Yeah, especially after work, because a lot of other parishes will just do it in the morning or something when it's only for retirees. But
Right.
Yeah.
we really want to.
It's between like the
Emphasize that.
7:30 mass and noon.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
really want to emphasize. No. It's for families. It's for everybody. Come
Yeah.
stop by.
Right. And I think
visit
like from
Jesus.
from a priest, it's like, well, at the very least, you have a holy hour. If no one else
I do,
comes,
but
yeah.
I'll be honest. I do my holy hour every day, but I like to do it privately for a couple reasons.
Yeah.
One is I pace the chapel. I do
Right.
that. I make my pilgrimage around
Really?
the chapel. Yeah, it's the only way I can pray is walking around. I cannot pray sitting
Yeah.
down.
Really?
But also, it's surprising how distracting other people are.
No, that's what I'm saying. But like,
So-
but even if for priests that maybe aren't as disciplined with their holy hours,
Oh, yeah, then they
then
should
you
definitely-
are, then you know, at a minimum, if you're the only one in the church for this hour waiting for somebody to come to confession, and you have it set up such that you're in the presence, yada yada.
Yeah.
Like, great, you have now have a holy hour.
Which is important because I'll be honest with you, not a whole lot of priests do a holy hour.
Really?
Yeah, it's not. It's not. The younger priests
Dang it.
do, but
You gotta love those
of,
young
of
priests.
an older generation, it's not common.
Right.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Sorry to spoil that.
No, I mean,
I'm not surprised.
But you see that in the way in which they celebrate Mass. You know, because when you make the point of spending an hour in front of Jesus every day, you realize it's Jesus.
right. Can I ask a question that might be challenging?
Go for it.
Is it fair to paint with such broad strokes about older generations of priests?
I found with few exceptions, yeah, it's pretty accurate.
Okay.
Well, and also you said that you'd be
I mean,
surprised at how many there are that don't pray. You didn't say that. You didn't say
No,
any
no,
particular-
I know,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think the majority.
You would say the majority.
the
So
majority
you'd actually
of
put a
priests from-
specificity.
Yeah, I would say the majority of priests ordained more than 15 years is probably in the minority of.
More than 15 years.
That's pretty recent, eh?
Yeah, it's pretty recent. It's a pretty recent development.
Oh wow.
Really?
I
Yeah.
mean, that's a good thing.
How long
And
have you
a
been
bit more.
ordained?
11.
Made it just under
And
the
I'll tell
cut.
you, well, I mean, the seminary I went to really emphasized that. But I remember speaking with some older seminarians when I was a young seminarian. And I
Right.
said, do you guys pray a holy hour every day? And they said, well, it's not required, so no.
Right.
And it wasn't required, and it's not actually required in the seminary that I was at, but they had it available, and everyone went.
Right. Right.
But
Which is arguably even better.
when it's
Not required. Everybody did it voluntarily.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. Because again, as we were talking about, why would you become a priest in today's world if it were not for
Yeah.
falling in love with Jesus? There's no other reason, right?
Yeah.
And it is interesting if you listen to priests who've been ordained for 30, 40 years, 50 years, they'll tell you the reason they became a priest is because they looked up to Father Jones or Father, this priest at their parish, or something that you just, you reached 8th grade and you didn't know what to do, so I just kind of entered high school seminary. Now the only reason priests are becoming priests is because they've had an encounter with Jesus Christ. And that's not the case. There are older priests who don't even know you can have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
Right.
Which, you'd think that's a no-brainer, but it's not a no-brainer because there was a culture of Catholicism where that wasn't spoken of.
Right.
It was
Right.
like you do your prayers, but
Right,
a
you're
personal
knocking 'em
relationship
down.
with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds almost Protestant.
Well, I think
you know?
there's an important. I heard this from a Dominican on a retreat, and it's like you can have a personal so you connect the kind of codified prayers that we say, like Liturgy of the Hours, let's say for you and lay people if they so choose, and the personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I think as a Catholic Church, we would say something like you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, but on His terms, which is through the context of the Church.
Yes.
Right, and that's where we separate from our Protestant brethren to some extent.
But I will say the liturgy is not enough. It's just not enough, period. It's not
Yeah,
enough,
no,
it's
I
not
agree
enough
with
for priests,
that.
it's not
Yeah,
enough
yeah.
for lay people to develop a personal relationship with Christ. And I really do mean that. And that sounds really bad because it sounds like it's downplaying the Mass. Like, yeah, the Mass
was
is not
like,
enough.
Father, you're
not
a
enough.
priest.
No, but it is not enough. Like,
No, you're right.
You can't
It's
have
not
a personal relationship with Christ just with the Mass. Like, you know,
No, but I think you still would you say though that you would need it in a context of this. We were talking about the Eucharist, like in the context of the sacraments, where it's properly ordered.
I would say yes, but you look at the lives of early church hermits.
Yeah.
Who would go to Mass once a year and had a very, very great faith and a very great living relationship with Christ. It's more of a recent, like the last 1,000 years, recent development in the church that the Mass is the primary encounter with Christ. Now it is. The Eucharist is body, blood, soul, and divinity.
Right.
But our idea that like a priest has to celebrate daily Mass was not present in the early church.
I don't think you have to.
And,
right?
and
I actually don't. Yeah, I don't have to celebrate
and
Mass, but-
I was gonna say
I do.
to even further prove
the
that
record.
this is not a novel idea, that reiterate it doesn't matter. They heard. Go back.
Yeah, just hit
Rewind.
It's okay. Back 10 seconds.
Saint Jerome said, "Ignorance of Scripture is ignorance of Christ." Right. So if you are not familiar with Scripture, right, you can't have that personal relationship.
Right.
And yes, you get Scripture in the liturgy. You know what I mean? Like, I recognize that, but it's not an in-depth study of Scripture.
Right.
It's not.
Well, it's not intended to
certainly
be.
not
Yeah,
in
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Certainly not in this day and age. You're not getting Saint Augustine and his like ridiculous sermons. You know what I mean? His unbelievable sermons that everybody came around to hear. You know what I mean? You're not getting Saint John Chrysostom. Unless you go to Father Gill's parish.
Right. Or Bishop Barron.
Or Bishop Barron.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even then, it's like, I mean, think about what you just said. You know what I mean? Like, my encounter with Bishop Barron isn't in the liturgy.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess not yet. You're right. I
It
don't
might-
live,
it might
I
be-
don't,
it might
I
be
don't
the
live
office
in
of
I don't live in
readings or
Minnesota. You're right.
Yeah. Off the reading.
But
No, so that's my only point. I think there is some. I think we have to caveat that.
Yes.
A little bit.
I agree.
And I think
I
that
agree.
goes back to our point of this whole episode, which is the Eucharistic procession. Like, that is something that's, you could say, is orchestrated by the church. right? It's in common. It's in the church in the sense that it's the mystical body of Christ, which is us that we're part of, but it's also by the administrative side of the church to actually effectuate that, right?
And
so,
I mean, that would be considered a paraliturgical event in that it's connected to the liturgy.
Right.
It's an offshoot of the liturgy, but it's not a liturgy.
right, because
per
the
se.
liturgy is like is like an event. That's kind of what the word means, right? Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, strictly speaking, a liturgy is a set form of worship that you really can't deviate from, right? So the Mass, the sacraments, and liturgy of the hours are the three types of liturgies that you have in the church. So anything else, I mean,
What about benediction?
Is it in that order?
Is that not a liturgy?
no, benediction would be a liturgy. Yeah, benediction is a liturgy. Yeah, but like a procession, you could do 2 stations, 4 stations, no stations. You could sing, you could
Right, I
be
see what you
silent.
mean.
It's like
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
lot of different options into what you can do, and that's and so you adapt that to the needs of the people, and
Right.
and that's why I think our church is rich in both liturgy, paraliturgical events, and private devotions.
Private devotion. Yeah.
All of which are needed in the
Right.
spiritual life for any Catholic.
Right.
Right.
It's great.
But yeah.
Yeah. So I think maybe just like, well, how do we effectuate this? It sounds like a greater. So some of the concrete things that we could say, because I'm a pragmatist, is a greater reverence for the Eucharist at Mass, and kind of a help from clergy, let's say, to effectuate that. Paraliturgical events like having adoration, holy hours, and praise and worship music and processions, and then really encouraging personal devotion, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Daily rosary, Divine Mercy Chaplet, one Our Father
Right.
before you go to bed,
Reading
like something,
scripture
like
itself.
This is start.
reading scripture. Like you start somewhere, and then like you
Yes.
don't know where that grows.
Yeah.
Like one Hail Mary is better than 0 Hail Marys to some extent.
That's
right?
true. That's
one
true.
Hail Mary prayed well is better than like a rosary prayed in vain. There's a
Yeah,
saying,
I've
something
heard
like that. Yeah.
That's very true. Our heart and soul has to go into it, especially
Yeah.
when we're talking about the Eucharist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heart and soul. So thanks for joining us in this episode of Restless. If you have a chance to take a look at the National Eucharistic Revival, any of the events, maybe see some footage on YouTube or hear some of the great speakers, the Eucharistic preachers that have been coming around, I encourage you to do so and make Eucharistic Revival a part of your own life and your own parish's life. You can find us on Veritas Catholic Network, 1350 AM, which is different than Camp Veritas. And you-
Quite.
But I
we
do-
don't have any children here.
I
so-
don't. We don't.
Yeah.
And you can also find us on other places too.
Yeah.
Like YouTube,
Anywhere.
YouTube, podcast,
And
everywhere you would
Google
look.
Podcast,
maybe even Minnesota.
Spotify.
I don't know. But tune in next time.
Right.